Well, one of the interesting things about design is that you really don't know very much about the world. You don't know much about science. You may not know much about literature and history. And the fact that you do not know very much is your most important strength. That's why you are such great designers. Because if you don't know anything, well, you are not stuck in the past. You are not stuck with the ideas of the field. And when you are thinking about a new design, well, suppose that you are asked by a client to do something. You will ask stupid questions. The most powerful questions in the world are stupid questions. Because a stupid question is never stupid. What it means is there is something that people just take for granted. They've never thought about it. And when you ask them, why do you do that? They think, oh, what a stupid question. I've always done it this way. But when they try to answer the question, often they find they cannot. Well, I've often done it this way. I've always done it this way. This is the way it is. Those are not good reasons. And by asking those questions, you can often think of a whole new way to approach a problem that the experts would never think of. The trouble with experts is they know too much. And they think the same way every other expert thinks. And designers don't know anything. And that's your brilliance. Now, here's another rule that I follow. It's related. When somebody asks me to solve a problem, it could be a client, it could be someone who wants me to help design, it could be a company, it could be your professor. I never solve that problem. I always say, why do you want me to solve that problem? And when the person tells me, I ask, well, why is that? And when the person tells me, I ask, why is that? I practice what the Japanese call the 5 whys. Ask the question why 5 times. Now, it may not be 5. It may only be 2. Or it may take you 10. But the important point is, when someone says, here's the problem I want you to solve, it's almost always the wrong problem. You have to find design thinkers do. Design thinkers step back and say, what is the real problem we are trying to solve? And then they ask stupid questions. And then the best designers come up with the brilliant solutions. Yes.
Thank you.
Here's the problem. Everybody wants to do a radical innovation that dramatically changes the world. And I have written, working with Roberto Berganti in Milano, we have written an argument that says, if you want to do radical innovation, it has to come from you. That you cannot go out and you cannot do design research because you're doing something completely different. You know, so if you look at all of the great inventions of the world, none of them were done by design research. They were all done by some inventor, just had an idea and pushed it. But how many such radical inventions are there? So if you think about the big changes that have changed your life, so from the very past, looking at the invention of the light bulb, the railroad, the steamship, electric lighting and electric motors and the phonograph and the radio and the television and the automobile and the airplane and the television and the internet and the cell phone. You list all of them, and it isn't that many. Can you think of 50 very radical innovations that have taken place in the last 100 years? You would have difficulty. 50 in 100 years, that's one every 2 years. They are not very common. So lots of people have radical ideas. There are probably thousands every year, and most of them fail. So yes, if you really have this radical idea, you should push it. You should say, I believe, and you may change the world. But you are most likely to fail. And even if you do succeed, now here are two warnings. One, if you look at the history of radical innovations, time between inventing it and having it succeed is measured in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. We are talking by this is sort of a video telephone. When was that first thought of? You will be surprised. How long do you think the idea of a video telephone has been around? Any guess? It was invented in 1873. 1873. And it still does not exist. I mean, it still is, look at this. I mean, this is pretty bad. In fact, probably as we are talking, the sound will disappear and the picture will disappear. You have to call me up again. And probably my picture is sometimes good and sometimes bad. And maybe my sound is good or bad. So it's going to take a very long time. Second, when the radical innovation first happens, it's not very good. So here's a product that I worked on. It failed. Okay, so here's a failure I worked on. It was a camera that didn't require film, a digital camera. Is that a bad idea? Well, no, that's all we have today. But I was at Apple Computer. I was at Apple in 1993 when Apple released a digital camera. You may not know that Apple produced a digital camera because it failed. So Apple stopped making it. So here's a great idea. Too soon. Wasn't really very good. It failed. So if you want it to succeed, most designs are what we call incremental innovation. You take ideas that already are there and you make them better. And that's where you must do human-centered research and watch people and discover their real needs. Because what you thought the need might be is not what it will be. Thomas Edison invented the phonograph. And he started companies to make the phonograph, and they all failed. Thomas Edison thought the purpose of the phonograph was to replace paper. We'll never again have to use paper. We'll just record things. If he would have done some design research, he would have discovered that was silly. It's really hard. Would you like, instead of books, would you like to have to listen to lectures that go on for hours and hours? A book is much faster and easier. You can skim it, you can read it. So he had the great idea, but he didn't know how to make it practical. So, I mean, what you asked a really good question because it gets at the heart of what designers do. That's why I answered yes to your question. Yes, we should ignore users and just follow our own heart. if you want radical research. But be prepared to fail. 99% fail. If you want something that is successful all around the world, then you must do good design research and find out real needs. I was talking to a student the other day. Many students like to come to my home and talk to me. And she had spent the summer working for a company called Teague Design. Teague Design is in Seattle, Washington, in the United States. And they do all of the designs of the inside of all of the airplanes that Boeing aircraft does. So there are only two big airplane manufacturers in the whole world. One of them is Airbus in Europe, and the other is Boeing in Seattle, Washington. So this is a very important job. And if you ever fly in these big airplanes, they're not really very comfortable. They're not really well designed in many ways for the people who fly in them. And I am always amused when Boeing has just released their latest airplane, which is just starting to be flown today. It's called the 787 Dreamliner. It's a very big plane, and it has really big windows. And they advertise you can really see much better the passengers because of very big windows. Well, if you ever fly, what happens when you get on the airplane and you take off? The first thing they do is tell you, please pull down the shades, cover the windows. And I've always wondered why we have windows when they make us cover them. They cover it so people can watch movies. They cover it so people can sleep. They cover it for a lot of reasons. So why does it matter we have big windows? And why is it that you always get stuck in the aisles with people in their baggage, and the baggage compartments are never big enough? So it turns out that Teague Design are experts at designing the insides of planes. They understand the weight requirements. They understand the safety requirements. They understand the requirements that the government puts on them and that Boeing aircraft puts on them. And they've never asked, what is it like to be a passenger? And she said she flew home to China and back to Seattle, Washington, and she took video pictures of all the passengers boarding, getting in each other's way, the problems they had. And she showed it to the people at Teague Design, and they were, oh, so amazed. They had never done this themselves. And that's the problem with becoming specialists. That when you know too much, you get to be very good, but you don't ask the stupid questions. Now, the problem is that you do have to be a specialist, because if you are designing the inside of an airplane, that's a very dangerous environment when there is a crash. So your seats have to be very strong. You cannot have objects flying through the air, so things have to be secure. The luggage on top is a very bad safety problem because it's heavy, and if the plane is bouncing, you don't want the stuff flying out, coming down. There are many, many difficult problems, and the airlines are trying to make money, so they put as many passengers together as they can fit. So how do you become an expert at the requirements, but still become a beginner at seeing things? And that's the problem. And I don't know the answer. I work with a company called IDO, which maybe you've heard of. And IDO prides itself on not being an expert. And they do not allow their designers to become experts. So they are very careful that they have maybe 500 people working for them. And they give them a different kind of problem each time. Today you are designing the inside of a train. And the next project you'll be designing a health system for the United States or maybe for Singapore. And the next time you'll be designing, I don't know, a cell phone. And the next time you'll be designing a children's toy, a toothbrush. And they are very careful to shift around. They never let a person work in the same field over and over again. And they are trying to avoid this problem of knowing too much. On the other hand, that means they must bring in a large number of experts in the field. Because you could not design something for a physician, a surgeon, to use in the operating room unless you were pretty expert about what went on in the operating room. So it's this very difficult balance, being an expert and knowing a lot. And it's a hard problem, and the great designers manage it. You have to, somehow you must always maintain your curiosity and being able to ask the stupid question. The hardest thing to see is something that is always there. The hardest question to ask about is something that is obvious. And the great designs come from seeing something that is always there, but nobody, and therefore nobody sees it, and from asking about the obvious. And that's really difficult to do if you are an expert. Again, a good question. The problem of standards is, look, these are all hard problems. And I'm glad you're asking about them, but they're not easy. When it is really important to have international standards, but if you do it too soon, then you standardize on the old stuff. And it is very difficult to have innovation. And if you wait too long, it's too late. Everybody is doing it in every way. I mean, here's an example. When you travel with your laptop, say, your computer, or your cell phone, from one country to another. What does the plug that you plug into the wall look like? It's different all over the world. I think there are 30 or 40 different kinds of plugs. And so you have to carry with you lots of adapters. Or you have to buy these ones that can be general purpose, and they're big and heavy and clumsy. And that's a lack of standardization. Wouldn't it be better if we could just standardize and just have one thing that we plug in? But it's too late. Every country has set up standards, but all the countries are different. The EU has tried to set up a standard, and it's only partially successful. And the Asians use a plug that's very much like the European plug, but not the same. One of them uses thin prongs, and one of them uses thick prongs, and one of them fits inside the other, but I think the thin will fit inside the thick, but the thick won't fit inside the thin. And I never remember which is which. So whenever I go to Europe or to Asia, I have to take both because I can't remember which one was right. So that's one problem with standardization. But if you don't have standardization, can you imagine driving an automobile where sometimes you use the left foot to go faster and the right foot for the brake, and sometimes it's the opposite? It would be very dangerous. So the automobile has managed to standardize the basic functions, but they haven't standardized how we shift. So the position of reverse gear is different in Europe than it is in Asia. And they haven't standardized, you have a steering wheel and there's all these controls on the side. They're called stalks. Those are different in every car. Or try to find the headlights, which could be very dangerous. You need the lights. Try to find them in a new car. They're all over the place. Now, is there great innovation in putting the headlight switch some new place? No, who cares? That would not change the sales of a car. Now, you asked about gestures. I think it is too early to standardize on gestures. We're just in the very beginning of understanding them, and we're moving from the main gesture systems we have today are touch-based. So I touch the screen, and I move, and I touch it. I move it right or left or up or down, and one finger or two fingers or three fingers or even four fingers, and maybe tap and hold, or maybe two taps and maybe three taps. It's a mess. But we're also moving towards gestures that don't have to touch anything. So the Microsoft Kinect, which uses a television camera to watch, is now being done by many people just, well, here I am in front of my computer and there's the camera right there. Well, that camera, why can't it see me do this or this? And so we are now starting to see these gestures in space. But we don't know enough about gestures yet. So there it's too early to standardize. But while I'm on the topic, here's my real problem. It's okay if you don't standardize on gestures. But why don't you at least give me a hint about what gesture I can do? The problem with today's gestures is you cannot discover them. So here's a simple example. You may not think of it as gesture, but it's simple. How many of you have iPhones or iPods? Okay, a lot of you. And you must use, many of you use Apple's headset, right? Because it comes with it. So how many of you use Apple's headset?
It's 9 o'clock.
Yeah, I see some hands. Now, it comes down and there's some buttons here, right? The buttons on it. How many buttons? Just yell. Just say it out loud, loud. 3. How many do you think there are? 2. I see some. How many think there are 3? 4 hands. It's amazing. There are 3 buttons, but there are many people who do not know this. Because there's a button on top that says plus, there's a button on bottom that says minus, and there's a space between them. Who ever knew it was a button? Now, what does that button do? Well, so actually using the button is a kind of a gesture. If you're listening to music, you want to listen, you want to start, you click it once. You want to stop, you click it once. Suppose you don't like that song. You want the next song. Click it twice fast. Suppose you really like that song. You want to go back and play it again. You want to back up a song. Click it 3 times fast. Suppose that, oh, I don't know, I want to go far ahead. How do you go fast forward? Well, you click twice and then hold it down. How about if you want to go fast backwards? Oh, well, you click 3 times and then hold it down. Now, what if a phone call comes in and you want to answer it? Well, you click it once. What if you don't want to answer it? Click it once and hold it at least 2 seconds. What if you have 2 phones on the line at the same time and you want to switch back and forth? Well, you click once and that switches you to the next phone. Switch to the other phone call and hang up this phone call. Actually, I forget what you do, but I think you click it twice and hold it down for a couple of seconds. It's crazy. Who would ever know this? The only reason I know it is I think it is so crazy that I'm writing about it. So I'm writing an article about it. So I'm carefully studying the manual because how would I remember? And how would you ever learn this yourself? And you can't even look in the manual because it's on many different pages. It's not even in one place. So that's the problem with gestures. How on earth do you know what to do? Microsoft is bringing out a new operating system for phones. It's called Windows Phone. I think it's better than Apple's operating system. And here's one reason. How many times have you looked at your iPhone and you go on an app and you don't know whether you should swipe to the right or left or up or down? There's no way of knowing. And Microsoft has done some clever things, one of which is it shows you a little bit on the sides what you will see if you move that way. A very important principle of design is discoverability. Can the person discover what the actions are? With Apple, you cannot discover. With the old Apple, with old-fashioned computer systems, you can always discover. There are menus. You must know when you go to the computer with a new system, you often pull down each menu and you look at it. That's how you discover what you can do. With the gesture systems, you cannot discover. And Microsoft has put back discoverability. So there are several solutions. One is if it were standardized, then everyone would know. But you kill some innovation. The other, though, is why not use clever design to make it discoverable? The cloud technologies are very powerful, and they actually allow life to be much simpler in many ways. I rely heavily on the cloud, that I use many devices. So my mail system is Google Mail. So if you write to me at my mail address, jxd.org, that's actually Google Mail. And what that means is I can be using my phone, I can be using the computer I'm sitting at right now. I have a computer in my living room. I have an iPad. I can be traveling any place in the world and go to any computer, and there is my mail. And if I start a message and say, no, I do not want to send it yet, I want to save it, it's waiting for me at any computer in the world. And that's the advantage of the cloud, because the message is saved in the cloud. So any computer lets me get to it. And the cloud is very, very efficient in letting many people share documents, work together. We use Google Docs a lot in my business because I can write notes and my other people around the world can read them and change them, and can even change them while I am changing them. And that's only possible with cloud computing. Cloud computing has some problems because it's a new technology. One of them is it requires continual access to the internet, and sometimes at high bandwidth. And if you do not have access to the internet, then you do not have your mail or your documents or the application you want to use. Second is the problem of safety, that many people are concerned that if it's in the cloud, it's public, yet I don't want my private information to be public. It might be private information about me, or it might be about a new product that we are developing for a company, and we do not want the competitors to see the product. Or we know there are people who can do what is called a denial of service attack. So a standard attack on a company or even a person is I send the company website or address, I simply send them requests, millions of them, millions of requests every second for maybe a day or two. So many requests that the company, even though the company doesn't want to do anything with them, it keeps the computers so busy the company cannot respond to anything else. So a denial of service attack would mean you could not get to anything in the cloud. And that would not affect your own computer. So it's a trade-off, and the systems are new, but I'm a fan of the cloud. I think the cloud makes our lives easier, more efficient, more effective, makes it easier to cooperate. And so I write a lot, so I don't remember what I might have written in this interaction article, but I might have been talking about the current state. Any new technology takes 10 years. 10 years before we learn how to use it and it becomes stable. I think the cloud has been very effective at serving our behavioral needs. It also solves another very important problem, which is updating all of your apps. I mean, I have a lot of apps on my cell phone, and it seems every time I turn it on, there are 4 or 5 of them who want to be updated. And the same with my computer system. It's always wanting to update something. In the cloud, I don't have to do that because they do it for me. So that also simplifies my life, keeps me safe. So I think the cloud is a good example of satisfying behavioral needs, but where the technology isn't quite ready yet. No, I think that we're doing more than having fun. That a lot of the designs we do really do make our lives more pleasurable. Look, what we're doing right now. This would not have been possible 5 years ago. And it's not as good as if I were there, but it's better than nothing. It works well. And many of the designs that we have do improve our lives. Now, there is a problem that you mentioned, and it has to do with the way that companies operate, with the traditional capitalist system of companies. That companies often, far too often, are interested only in making a profit. And this funny notion of return of value to the people who own the company, people who own stock in the company, the shareholders. I think a company has a very strong obligation to the people who work for the company, to the community where the company is located, to keep people employed in a safe way, to the environment, and to the world. And we have been neglecting that. The way that Apple, for example, but it's true of everybody, Apple, Samsung, LG, whatever your company is, says, oh, we will bring out a completely new phone every 6 months, and we hope that you will always say, oh, that's better than my phone, and I will buy it. And it's not that much better. And the problem is, if you do that, what do you do with the old phone? It's very destructive on the environment to throw it away. It's very destructive on the environment to have made it in the first place, because it requires very exotic materials to do some of the LCD stuff, some of the microelectronics, some of the cases. I think companies have a more important obligation, and that we should make things that last a long time, and that if they should be upgraded, upgrade the software, make it possible to reuse things. Actually, I just saw a very clever design for a toothbrush. Because toothbrushes we use and then throw away. And this was a clever design of a toothbrush where the handle you would keep forever. And you could just replace the brushes. I think there has to be a change. And the change should be led by designers. But designers cannot do it by themselves. We must change the attitudes of the companies. Sometimes this may take new laws. It may take the United Nations to try to set a policy, but it will take each country the ability to set new laws about safety for the environment and safety for workers. So I don't want to stop innovating, but I do want to stop destroying the planet. But I do not see why clever designers cannot do both. You're an engineer. I don't know what kind, but here's a good example. For years, we used to make power supplies for the equipment. And the most important thing of the supply that you plugged into electricity was the cost. And they were extremely inefficient. And even when you turned off your equipment, they were still using electricity and wasting a large amount. And then everyone was different, so we threw them all away when we were finished. Well, it isn't very difficult to make a standardized supply that you never have to throw away. And that's starting to happen with the cell phone. It used to be every time you bought a phone, it was a different charger. And today that isn't true anymore. Today they all use the same standardized plug. Not all. Apple does not. Apple refuses to play standards. But almost every other cell phone uses what is called the micro USB connector. And then there's a standard, very small supply that plugs into the wall, and you can use that on anything you want. So I have one, an Amazon Kindle charger, and I use that to charge my cell phone. I use it to charge my Kindle. I use it to charge the Nook. I use it to charge all sorts of things around the house, and that's better for the environment. And you can make them very efficient. And you can make them that when you turn off the equipment, the charger. So I think that your concern is correct, and it's your responsibility to fix it. So this is a problem that is happening across the world. It's not just Turkey. And I think there are two different reasons. One is the world does not understand design. And second, designers don't understand business. So let me talk about, first, the world does not understand design. When you say, if somebody asks you what you do for a living and you say, I'm a designer, you design clothes, or maybe the interior, you do furniture, or the interior of an apartment. Designers basically make things look pretty. And good designers do make things look pretty, but they consider that the least important part of their job. The most important part is meeting people's needs. And that's what product design is about. But it's difficult to say I'm a product designer because most engineers think that they are. That's why we have so many bad designs, by the way. But it's difficult to convince companies that you can do a better job. Now, this is a problem. I have many friends and students in Italy, and they're all leaving Italy because they cannot find jobs. You graduate with your master's degree or PhD in design from Italy, and you must go someplace else where they understand what it is that you do. And but I see this all over the world. And then we have China, which has 1,000 design schools. And they are producing large numbers of designers, and they are mostly producing art designers. Designers who know about art, but do not really know about making products. And that is not helping. So the first problem is to educate the world as to what design really is. Design thinking. I wrote an article, some of you may have seen it, that I said that design thinking was a myth, not real. I mean, it is real. It's what I told you about in the beginning. It's stepping back and saying, I'm not going to solve the problem the way you want me to. I'm going to be creative and find out what the real problem is and solve the really important part. But that's what good people do in any field. It's what a good journalist does, a good novelist does, a good artist does, a good engineer does, a good scientist does, a good designer does. So it's not special to design. But if we tell people it's special to design, that helps. Because it means that when you go to a company, don't say I'm a product designer. Say I'm a design thinker. And they will not know what that means. And that's good. Because if you say I'm a product designer, they will think they know what that means, and they'll say, we don't need you. But if you're a design thinker, then they have to say, what is that? And that gives you a chance maybe to explain. Next problem. Why do you think that your ideas are good? You're saying you're having real problems getting your ideas built. How do you get, if this isn't built, it doesn't do any good. How do you convince a company? Well, what makes you think it's so good? Here's what has to happen for design to be good. People want, people have to be able, the company has to be able to build it and sell it at a price where it's low enough that people will buy it, but high enough the company makes some money. Because if the company does not make money, they go out of business. I think you do not understand design. The question, you said, should designers be the old style madmen? And are not designers, that's an advertising agency. They're artists. They make little pretty pictures. Put away design. Who creates the new media? Who invents the new media? It is designers. So if you want journalists, we will always need journalists. Always. We need good journalists. We need good editors. We need ways of knowing what is happening. But we cannot use the traditional ways anymore. We have better ways, new ways. That's a wonderful opportunity for designers to invent new methods of interaction, new methods of finding out what is happening in the world, new methods of knowing who is the interesting authority I might read. What should I read? What should I not? One of the nice things a publication does is it sifts all the nonsense in the world and gives me stuff that is reliable and has a point of view. We still need that, just not in the old-fashioned ways. So it's the best thing for designers, okay? And the great journalists also are great designers. And at Northwestern, we have called the Siegel Institute of Design, which includes people from journalism. And I worked with the dean of journalism at Northwestern, who is brilliant. He's wonderful. And we are trying to change journalism by using design methods. Thank you very much. Good evening.